This is always a highlight for me because today represents the hard work of the committee, but also the importance that social work education and social work practice is in the lives of very many Californians. And even though it might not be on the tip of their tongue that these social workers have done great things that have changed their lives.
My mother represents to me someone who has brought together the best of a humanitarian view of the world, the best of caring about children, which she brought to our family, and also, which I think is really striking in the unity of social work, the ability to try and influence policy.
I think it's always very important for us to honor the work of social workers who often work well below the radar, and we don't recognize people who are out in the field working very hard every day for those who don't have as much as others. So it's just a great honor to be here and to recognize the hard day-to-day work that these great people did in their lives.
Social work is a noble profession that has a wonderful history, and particularly in California we have such wonderful pioneers. And so I'm very grateful for being here today, and I'm really looking forward to the program.
I've been on this committee since its inception. The committee was initiated by Jim Carles, social worker, and what we are doing today, which is honoring California's most outstanding social workers, was the vision of Jim Carles, and it's wonderful to be part of this.
Oh, I'm exceedingly happy to be here. This is a very, very touching, emotional time for me. You know, I wasn't expecting it. When I received the invitation, I was very moved. It's very critical that we remember that there were many struggles, many battles, and many historical victories in our field and our profession. And I'm so happy that this has been done, and for posterity and for history.
It's just wonderful to see all the wonderful things that social workers do in the state of California.
Very proud to be here at the Hall of Distinction induction ceremony for its 2013 inductees. The program, which is housed at the Social Work Archives at the University of Southern California, is really the showcase for California's great social workers.
Social workers have done as much as any profession to improve the lives of children and families in many, many ways. I'm also here to give the nominating speech for Judith Wallerstein, probably one of the most important persons in the research of divorce and children.
It is really wonderful to hear and to see all the inspiring work that all of these social workers do. And it is very important that we preserve all the stories of the work that they've done.
I have been a proud social worker for almost 40 years. And really don't feel deserving of this recognition today, especially seeing the archives flashing in this room with all of the great names of social work pioneers and heroes that have come before. So it was a great honor and very humbling to be part of the program today.
So at last we have a way of showing our appreciation, acknowledging so many people for not only what they have done in the past, but what they're doing now. And we firmly believe, I firmly believe, that what we are doing really has an impact on the future of the profession.
Well, I'm a MSW member and have been for quite some time, and very pleased that we are honoring some very distinguished persons who've done a lot for the profession. I'm very much of an archivist at heart, and I'm in favor of preserving data and information always.
I always find that it is so inspirational to hear the life stories sometimes, the work stories, the professional histories of some of our members. Some incredible work that has been done in the past, and has built a foundation for future work that continues to today.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the 2013 California Social Work Hall of Distinction Induction. My name's Colleen Friend, and I'm the chair of this committee. And as the chair, I'm up here for a couple of things to make sure that we do some thank yous. And I first want to honor our class of 2013. As we look at this induction, we see an exceptional group of social workers with a range of skills. And as we look at their skills, we remind ourselves that social workers are called on to do a wide variety of things, from intensive case management to using advanced clinical skills to being administrators, educators, researchers, practitioners, and even elected officials with a public policy focus. So it reminds us how diverse our profession is. The ceremony is always moving for me. I always look forward to this. I think when the day is done, you're going to say to yourself, wow, can we do that again next year? And we're available to do this again next year. We're going to do it in Southern California, and we alternate between Southern and Northern California. So when you hear about the achievements of all our remarkable inductees, and you listen to their acceptances and the words of coming from them themselves, as well as their extended family members, I want you to be thinking about who you might nominate for next year. Because our committee needs your thoughts, we need your nominations, we need your ideas about who are the great social workers in California. We want to thank our committee for all their hard work. This is a very on it and hardworking group of about 15 social workers on our committee. They meet every month, and ultimately it's hard to make these decisions, but they do this with grace and honor. What I'm going to do is we have several of them here today. I'll refer you to the back of your program to see all 15 of our committee members, but 7 of them are here today. I'm going to call their names, and I'll ask you in the interest of time to hold your applause, and then I'll have them all stand at the end, and we can recognize them all together. Today with us is Suzanne Dvorak-Peck, Ellen Dunbar, Manuel Frimbres, Esther Gillies, Jim Kelly, Catherine Ralph, and Catherine is just joining us, so welcome, Catherine, Jan Lee Wong, and Nancy Yim Lee. Next, I want to thank the person who's probably the first person you met when you responded for the Hall of Distinction event. She's sort of the face of the committee. She holds us together. She worked on all the details for today's events, large and small, with the jeweler's eye for what needs to get done, and she gets it done. Our manager, Katie Mahalski. Could we give her a round of applause? Where's Katie? Thank you, Katie. Thank you. We also want to thank the NASW staff. We want to thank Cheryl Rayner and her staff and the volunteers who helped with registration. Thank you very much. And for Jan Lee Wong, thanks for always including us with NASW. Thank you for generously sharing your time and space with us. We appreciate that. And now I'd like to thank our 15 sponsors. This is a record for us this year to have 15 sponsors. And without our sponsors, we really couldn't put on this event. So many of them are schools of social work, schools and departments of social work, and some of them are private individuals. But where it's an academic institution and somebody's made the decision to sponsor us, I'd like to give them some name recognition. So let me read off the list, and please hold your applause till the very end so that we can recognize them all together. First, we have the USC School of Social Work with Dean Marilyn Flynn. Then we have California State University, Dominguez Hills Department of Social Work, And the new chair there is Victor Manalo. And is Victor with us today? I thought he might be. Victor's also an elected official. He's also the mayor of Artesia. California State University, Fresno Department of Social Work, Virginia Rondero Hernandez. California State University, Los Angeles School of Social Work, my home, Dale Weaver. California State University Stanislaus Department of Social Work, Robin Ringstadt. Loma Linda University Department of Social Work and Social Ecology, Beverly Buckles. San Francisco State University School of Social Work, Eileen Levy, and representing them today here with us is Rita Takahashi. UCLA Department of Social Welfare, Todd Franke. San Jose State University School of Social Work, Jack Wall. California Deans and Directors of Social Work, and they also have an ad in the program, so please do look at that. UC Berkeley School of Social Work, and Dean Jeffrey Edelson is with us today. National Association of Social Work, California Chapter, and Jan Lee Wong is also with us today. We also want to thank our sponsor, Susan Dvorak-Peck, from the International Federation of Social Workers, and she's also with us today, as well as Esther Gillies, and we'll be hearing from Esther Gillies later on in the program. So now I'd like to turn the program over to Monica White. But before Monica comes up, let me tell you that she's also a model of social work advanced practice. She's been an expert, an educator, a researcher, an author. She is the vice chair of our committee, and she's also an adjunct associate professor of both social work and gerontology at USC. She's also an excellent MC and a very engaging host. So with that, Monica, please come up. Thank you.
It's so great to be back here for this, I think, very important occasion. It's really thrilling, I think, that we have a way to acknowledge our pioneers, the people who came before us, who made it possible for us to do the things that we do, and the people who are now such great leaders in the field. I'd just like to take a half a minute to acknowledge Frances Lomas Feldman. This is the 5th year from her passing, but Frances Feldman, who was at USC since 1939, I know, really was a founder, not only in establishing the Hall of Distinction, but also the California Social Welfare Archives, which is really the host organization for the Hall of Distinction. So a shout out to Frances. We miss you. I'd like to start by introducing our first presenter. I'm going to be introducing the presenters, and then the presenters will bring up our honorees. So I'd like you to meet Nancy Lim Yee. She is the program director for the Chinatown Child Development Center. It's part of the Department of Public Health in San Francisco. And she is an active member of the Hall of Distinction Committee, for which we are very grateful. Nancy, will you come on up?
It's so nice to see all of you here today, and it's also so nice to see so many familiar faces. Thank you for attending. It is my privilege and honor to be presenting this special recognition for Ms. Sai-Ling Chu. You each have a commemorative program in front of you, and I hope that you will take some time to read about all of Sai-Ling's great accomplishments during her long career as a social worker. This afternoon, I would like to share with you just a few more facts about Sai-Ling beyond what is written in the program from a more personal perspective. You see, I have known Sai-Ling for the past 38 years. First, as a colleague, when I first started working at the Chinatown Child Development Center, also known as CCDC, back in 1975, when Sai-Ling was a psychiatric social worker and I was a community mental health worker. And then she became my boss several years later when she became the program director at CCDC. In 1991, not long before Sai-Ling left CCDC to become the assistant director and later the director of the Child, Youth, and Family section of the Community Mental Health Services section of the San Francisco Department of Public Health, she came to me and strongly suggested that if I were to remain in the mental health field, that maybe I should become or go back to school and become a social worker. Because, maybe I wouldn't get very far if I didn't. I had graduate degrees at that time in education and special ed. And I had considered going back to graduate school and getting a social work degree, but, I never felt that it was the right time because I had, 3 young children, and although I had thought about going back to school, again, it was never quite the right time. But Sai-Ling said, well, you really should think about it. And so anyway, with that extra little kick in my behind, I really took, her words to heart. And she also said that she would support me in my efforts. So I decided to apply for the part-time program at San Francisco State, and I was accepted. So although Sai-Ling left CCDC the year that I began the MSW program at San Francisco State, I did receive support from her successor. And so I finished the program and eventually became licensed, and the rest is history, as they say. And I became the program director eventually at CCDC. And have been the program director there for the last 8 years. So thank you, Sai-Ling, for encouraging me to become a social worker. I've never regretted that decision. 3 months ago, I began a leadership training series for my staff. During one of the trainings, I had the staff break into 2 different groups to do an exercise. We had been talking about leadership traits and characteristics. And so the instruction for each group was to identify a leader and then to list traits or characteristics that make that person a good leader. So one group chose President Obama, and the second group chose Sai-Ling. And I wanted to read out the list of characteristics that they came up with. And this is a very accurate description of the person we are honoring today. This is a verbatim list of what the staff came up with. Intelligent, open to ideas, respectful demeanor, helpful to people and community, organized and able to lead, hardworking and goes the extra mile, finds and connects people to resources, passionate, cares about the community, charismatic, has a vision, is creative, can communicate her vision, and gets support for it. And so I am deeply honored to present to you Sai-Ling Chu Chan-Sew.
So thank you, Nancy. And I also wanted to actually thank the National Association of Social Workers for giving me this honor, and for Nancy for nominating me, and for the committee for selecting me. I'm really, really humbled because I actually went online and looked and see how many social workers are practicing in the United States right now. It's 65,000 social workers that's practicing in the United States. I feel that every one of them probably deserve this honor because they work every day off the behind for very little payment and respect and all that. So I am very humbled to be selected among all this and to receive this honor. And I just have just one thing to share with all of you is that our work is never done. So our work is never done. And my call for action is that we really need to be much more active, much more vigilant now, because equality.
As was already stated, be flexible and adaptable. Is it on? Well, it is. There we go. Thank you. What would we do without our technical folks? Thank you. Our next presenter is Manuel Fimbres. He's a professor emeritus from San Jose State University. He himself is an inductee. We inducted him in 2009, and also he is part of the Hall of Distinction Committee and is very active, very, very, very helpful. We're very fortunate to have him. Manuel, I think I saw you over there. Come on up.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, candidates, fellow members of the Hall of Distinction, bienvenidos. I am Manuel Fimbres, Professor Emeritus of the School of Social Work at San Jose State University and member of the Hall of Distinction. My duty this afternoon is to introduce to you Dr. Ismael Dieppa, candidate for induction into the Hall of Distinction. He is affectionately known to many of us as Andy. I am sure that you have read his many contributions recorded in his resume that is found in the program. But how do you honor a person who has given over 50 years of professional social work activity that has affected the lives of thousands? He has practiced social work, started and administered social work agencies and programs, taught and headed up schools of social work, and contributed to the social work literature. He did this during a turbulent era of our history that was not very friendly to Chicanos, Latinos, and pushy minorities. I think that by acknowledging his contributions, by recording them, and by institutionalizing them in the archives of a major university is the right thing to do. There they will reside for any scholar or interested person to pursue them, and his record will be there in perpetuity. But how do we acknowledge and compensate for the scars and the sufferings that he endured during his tenure? Wherein is justice? This I do not know. But I do know that Dr. Dieppa has the right to wear these scars as badges of honor gotten in the field of battle while serving the poor, the weak, and the dispossessed. He has the right to hold his head up high because his contributions made our world, our country, our state a better place to live. Enhorabuena, Dr. Dieppa. Congratulations. Now I call Margaret, his wife, to accompany him up here to help me induct Andy into the Hall of Distinction. Margaret has been at his side during the good times and bad as a source of comfort, support, advice, and love. Thank you, Margaret. I'll give you the plaque. I don't know how you want to give it to me.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this honor. It's good to be back in California, the state that I spent over half of my professional life working and enjoying my profession, the noble profession of social work. I want to express my sincere appreciation to the California Social Welfare Archives, Hall of Distinction Committee, and the committee chairperson, Colleen Friend. My profound gratitude to my alma mater, USC, School of Social Work, and the California NASW. I want to thank my good friend and my colleague, Manuel Fimbres, a companion of many battles in the 60s and the 70s. Achieving success and distinction in life, particularly during the difficult and turbulent years of my generation, the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, was only possible through the unfailing, unselfish, and loving support of family, friends, and colleagues. And for that reason, I want to thank my beloved wife for 38 years, Dr. Margaret Dieppa, a USC graduate. So, my daughter, Deborah Dieppa Yoder, and Yvette, and their husband, Marlene and Danny. Deborah is also a USC graduate. I have my sister, Salina Mayorga, here, and part of her family with us. I also have one of my students from Arizona State University, Martha Fimbres, who came all from Arizona to be here with us. And my niece, who is a professional social worker, retired from the New York school system, Fred B. Virella, who came all the way from New York to be here with us. And I also want to honor the presence of Manuel Ares and Dolly Ares. Manuel is also one of the soldiers who fought with me many battles in the 60s and the 70s. And my good friend, veteran, who I met while at a VA hospital. I'm a Korean veteran. I was flying combat in Korea. We both have PTSD, and I met Ray Martinez and his wife, and they honor me by their presence here today from Arizona. My social work professional career has spanned about, Manuel said 50 years. I have to tell you, I'm precocious. I graduated from high school at age 6. I finished college at age 16. I got my MSW at 22, so you can more or less tell my age, right? But 50 years that I have enjoyed every minute of it. And I say this because I lived through some of the most challenging historical moments in the history of social work, the field of social welfare, and the history of our country. And I'm talking about the era of the civil rights movement. I had the privilege to work with Cesar Chavez and Delano. I had the privilege also to march and be in Fresno with Martin Luther King, when we invited him to speak at a rally when we were fighting against closed covenants in housing in California. And it was an era that I enjoy exceedingly, even though, like Manuel said, there are scars, and there's pain, and there was suffering. But I have to say to you that I would not change anything in my life. If I had to live my life again, by some magic, I would be a social worker again. Because social work is the most noble profession. Social work is a profession that personifies what life is all about, a commitment, a vision to change, to improve the lives of people that are less fortunate than we are. In my years as a social worker, as an educator, as a practitioner, I have always had a commitment and continue with that commitment today to change that which has to be changed in our society. Whether it was at Arizona State University, where I developed the first American Indian Center to reach out to the American Indian population, to prepare social workers to go back and work with them. What it was at San Jose State University with a special mission to Hispanics. What it was at the University of Denver, what it was chairing the doctoral committee, the admissions committee, and in 3 consecutive years, out of 12 doctoral students, we admitted 9 ethnic minorities, African Americans, American Indian, Hispanics, Asian Americans. And I say to you today that the struggle continues ahead. Because today, in 2013, we are still struggling with the same issues we struggled back in 1960, 65. We still have the highest level of poverty in the US today, even higher than it was during the War on Poverty in 1964. Today, we face the reality that in 37 more years, the so-called people of color, ethnic minorities, will be the majority population in the US. Are we ready for that challenge? Are we ready for the challenge to the fact that we have an aging population where Alzheimer's is becoming an epidemic, a national epidemic, and we're ready for the fact that we have millions of immigrants in this country, and we lack a national immigration policy to address those challenging issues. And are we ready as social workers to face the challenge that race relations and civil rights, even after Martin Luther King's speech, "I had a dream," we still have an unfinished agenda. Let me finish by saying to you that nothing challenges me more and inspires me more than the many students that I work with. And I had the privilege of meeting this American Indian woman. Her name was Linda Woods, in a plane coming back from a CSWE conference in Chicago. I was reading a textbook on social work, and she looked at it, and she said, "Are you a social worker?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "You know, I had a dream to become a social worker, but I am 40 years of age, and I think I'm too old." And that was in March. We already had closed admissions at San Jose State. And I gave her my card and said, "This is Saturday afternoon. Monday morning, come to my office. I'll give you an application. We'll fill it. Maybe we can admit you." Monday morning, she came to my office. She filled the application. We admitted her. 2 years later, she graduated in 1991 from San Jose State University. And then she, at the graduation time, when she marched forward and she we hugged our students. Manuel, we gave her a flower, and she gave me this. And she was a poet. Linda was a poet, and she wrote this poem, and I'd like to share it with you. Here's a man following the dream. Here's a man with vision. I met this man on an airplane while following my dream. Only I didn't know what my dream was. Here's a man daring to risk, to ask my name. Here's a man offering me a different dream than my own. Here's a man offering encouragement when no one else would. Here's a man with a caring heart for the Indian woman with a different dream. Here's a man with a humility to stay in the background with a dream. Here's a man with the integrity to move forward with his dream. Here's a man with hope for a better future for us all. Yet, does anyone know? Yes, this Indian woman knows. Thank you, Andy Dieppa, for sharing your dream with me. I hope I can carry myself with my dream as you have. As you move forward, my prayers are for you, will be that you are well, satisfied, that your dream will be accomplished, that you enjoy your life with your family. Miigwech, thank you in Ottawa language, by white turtle woman, Linda Woods. That's what makes my life so beautiful and so satisfying. Thank you.
Wonderful story. I think a lot of us in our work have been able to enable others to achieve their dreams. And I sure agree that's a lot of what it's all about. I'd now like to introduce you to Jeffrey Edelson. Excuse me. He is the Dean of the School of Social Welfare at UC Berkeley after a number of years, many years of teaching there. He got his bachelor's in social welfare at Berkeley and an MSW PhD in Wisconsin at Madison campus. He's a leading expert in the field of domestic violence and a real authority in that area that we need a lot of work in. So help me welcome Jeffrey Edelson.
Thank you. I'm really delighted to be here to honor such incredible social workers, several of whom have been closely associated with the School of Social Welfare at Berkeley, two of whom have degrees from Berkeley, and Judith Wallerstein, who taught at Berkeley for many years. And Ismael, even though you talked about USC, you also have a Berkeley degree, so I'm going to claim you as well, and that was a very inspiring speech. I hope I get to that point in my career to make inspiring speeches like that. So it's my great honor to talk about one of our honorees today, Congresswoman Barbara Lee. She has an undergraduate degree from Mills College and received her MSW from Berkeley in 1975. All the time she was a student, she was a single mom with 2 young children. And at that time in the 70s, quite an accomplishment. Even today, it's quite an accomplishment. She began her political career as an intern in her predecessor, Congressman and Oakland Mayor Ron Dellum's office, where she eventually became the chief of staff of his office. Before being elected to Congress in 1998, she served in the California State Assembly and the California State Senate. She's an incredibly progressive voice in Congress, dedicated to social and economic justice, international peace, and human rights. She's truly living and breathing our profession's values every day. Elected in 1998, as I said, to the then 9th Congressional District, now it's the 13th Congressional District, she's established a reputation as a principled and independent legislator, unafraid to take tough stands on important issues and speak her mind for her constituents and for a more just America and for a safer world. As a social worker by profession, she's an advocate for people dealing with our federal bureaucracy, and that has been a priority for her. And she's not here today because she's still dealing with our federal bureaucracy, actually the congressional bureaucracy. She has aggressively represented the needs of underserved and vulnerable people in her district and throughout the U.S., advocating for a range of issues. In 2007, she joined with members of the Congressional Black Caucus to form the Congressional Out of Poverty Caucus. The caucus seeks to bring together lawmakers, organizations, community leaders, and other stakeholders to find concrete solutions to end poverty. The caucus is committed to increasing awareness about and finding bipartisan legislative solutions to eliminating poverty in the U.S. And this work continues this year as she became the first chair of the newly formed WHIP Task Force on Poverty and Opportunity. Again, another task force focused on human and economic impacts of reducing and eliminating poverty. She's been a strong proponent for safe communities and affordable housing, the homeless, low-income energy assistance, job training, making healthcare affordable and universal, just immigration policies, establishment of a living wage, protection of the right of women to make decisions about their reproductive health. She's senior Democratic whip, former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, and former chair of the Progressive Caucus. She has so many accomplishments. She's worked incredibly hard on global HIV/AIDS prevention issues. She was the only member of Congress, either in the House or the Senate in 2001, who voted against authorizing military force in Afghanistan, a very courageous stand. Yep. And a very foresightful stand. As an early and outspoken opponent of the Iraq War, she repeatedly proposed legislation for early U.S. troop withdrawal, and she's been a leader in the bipartisan effort to end, in Congress to end the ongoing genocide in Sudan. So she's the newly elected chair of the Congressional Social Work Caucus. That's very important for us. And yes, that's worthy of claps. And she was also just recently appointed by President Obama to be the U.S. representative to the United Nations. So that's also very... and because of our shutdown, as I said, she's not here today, but receiving her award is Sandra Andrews, a longtime representative for Congressional Lee. So welcome, Sandra.
Good evening. I'm Sandra Andrews, and I'm here on behalf of your Congresswoman and mine, Congresswoman Barbara Lee. Congresswoman Barbara Lee is honored and humbled to receive this award and to be inducted by her own. She wants you to understand that the only reason she is not here is because she is in D.C. with the other social workers who are fighting for economic development, Obamacare, and jobs for those that are in need, which is what the social workers do. Congresswoman Barbara Lee wants to let you know that this honor means an awful lot to her. It's not from the bottom of her heart, it's from her whole heart that she wants you to understand what you have done for her, because you were there when she needed you. When she went to UC Berkeley School of Social Welfare, following in the footsteps of her mentor, Ron Dellums, at the pushing of Mr. Robert Bauer, who is not here with us this evening, but he is the reason she went to Ron Dellums' office, because he picked her when she was at Mills as a single parent, struggling on public assistance. That's why she knows about SNAP. She's been there, she's done it, but because of all of you as her family, She is able to succeed, not as herself, but she stands on your shoulders, and she proudly stands on your shoulders, and she wants to thank every one of the social workers that are here, that are not here, that will be looking at this later. Because of you, she is your Congresswoman. So could you just applaud yourselves, because you've done a great job. Yes, you have, and you need to take credit for it. Because of what you have done, our representatives in D.C. are fighting for those less fortunate. Because of who? You told them it was okay to look out for those that didn't have. You told them it was okay to make certain that those that didn't have had some. You didn't say, I got mine, forget yours. You as social workers would not let anyone forget those that were in need. So on behalf of Congresswoman Barbara Lee, our constituents of our 13th Assembly District, oh God, forgive me, we were the Assembly District. With Assembly District, the Senate District, and now the Congressional District, we want to thank every single one of you, because without you, there would be no Congresswoman Barbara Lee. Without no Congresswoman Barbara Lee, there would not be a lot of other things. Because of you, we are who we are, and we're proud to be there. Thank you so very much. And on behalf of her, I love you all very much for this. This is a wonderful honor to be honored by your own. Thank you.
Much to be proud of, I think. Next, I'd like to call on Kurt Organista, who's a professor and associate dean at UC Berkeley in the School of Social Welfare, who will come up and introduce our next inductee.
Henry Joseph Solis would absolutely love today's event. He would love being recognized by USC's California Social Work Hall of Distinction for all of the work he did as a professional social worker, as well as a faculty member at UC Berkeley, where he served from the late 60s through the early 90s. To say that Joe, like so many social workers, has touched thousands of lives would not be any kind of an exaggeration. In fact, Irene and I were just talking. He was very meticulous about notes. He always had these sharp pencils and these pads, and he kept a lot of records. And by his own records, which I think is probably too low an estimate, he recruited and he placed and he trained at least 200 Latino social workers. And that's quite an accomplishment if you think about unleashing that workforce in the state of California. One of my favorite Joe Solis recruitment stories is that of Rafael Herrera. Rafael Herrera was working with the Cuban refugee program in the early 70s. Does anybody remember that? And Joe Solis happened upon Rafa, and he said, you got to get your MSW. You have to come to Berkeley, get your MSW. And of course, Rafa said, what are you talking about? I got a wife and kid. I need to support my family. How am I going to be a full-time graduate student at UC Berkeley? So Joe took out one of those sharp pencils, and he took out one of those pads that he's famous for, and he said, okay, here's your tuition. How much do you make a month? So Rafa told him how much he made a month, right? And then he took out his pad. He says, well, here's tuition. Here's a couple of grants. Here's a couple of fellowships I can get you. You know, actually, you're going to be $4 ahead every month. Rafa went on to direct a program in psychiatry. He went on to do crisis intervention on the streets of Oakland, which he still does today. He went on to work at UC Berkeley as a faculty member, even our director of admissions for many years. And I mention that because his story is emblematic of the sparkling and rippling effect that Joe's life had on so many people in social work. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Joe's beloved Intercambio program. Anybody remember the Intercambio program? Started in the early 80s, ran through about 2001, 2002. Joe spearheaded taking cohorts of social work students and public health students to Mexico, to the Universidad de Guadalajara, where they studied health and social services and the Mexican population, because he knew that this was a population that both the US and Mexico shared in common. And so you meet so many social workers now here in California, Latino and non-Latino alike, by the way, who look back at the intercambio as the highlight of their MSW experience at UC Berkeley. Rafa and I were hired at the School of Social Work in 1990. And Joe used to come by with that big grin. He always had a very warm grin. He had a kind of a mischievous sense of humor, wouldn't you say? And he'd say, "Oh, so we hired 2 Latino faculty, huh?" And we still have Peter Monolais on faculty. He says, "I can retire now. I can retire now." And you know what? He did. And we were shocked. I think we were in denial. We should have seen the signs coming. He kept talking about his grandson, Joey. He had a new grandson, Joey. Oh my God, he was so excited about that. Kept talking about his new red Toyota. What was that, a Celica or something? Do you remember that? It was like this meticulously clean Corolla Toyota. I remember, and then he kept talking about the new Los Lobos album, you know. I'm mentioning these because you have to, when a senior Latino faculty member is getting ready to retire, these are the warning signs. I've been very, very proud to call Joe a friend and colleague of mine. As a professor and a researcher at UC Berkeley, he made my life easier, just like he did for so many people. He paved the way for me to do migration research in Mexico with all of the colleagues that we met through the Intercambio program. So I am indebted to Joe for that. I feel such pride and joy today in his being honored. I think I share that pride and joy with all of you today. And I want to end by saying that the pride and joy that we're feeling at this moment is Joe's pride and joy, because he continues to live on in the hearts of so many people, of hundreds of thousands of people whose lives he touched as a professional social worker, as a faculty member at Berkeley, but also as just a very kind and warm and decent human being. Thank you.
This is such a special and wonderful day. First of all, I'd like to thank the committee, CSWA, Dean Jeff, Kurt, Tess Chandler, and Katie Mikulski, and everyone who nominated Joe. On behalf of my husband, Joe, we are honored to receive this award. Also, thank you for the family members, relatives, and friends who have supported us over the years. And thanks for coming today. I'd especially like to thank all the family members who came today, and maybe they could stand up. Some of my grandkids and daughters and Carmen is his sister, and she can't stand up, but she's been practicing this queen wave. Every time I go over, she says, "Oh, I'm practicing my queen wave because I can't stand up." And I also want to thank Renee. He took this picture when Joe retired, and Joe loved this picture, so that's why we kept it for the program today. And Joe was such a humble, dedicated, and hardworking person who valued his career and his family. At work, he assisted the students and did so many things, and he attended many Little League baseball games, as well as soccer, basketball, softball games, and dance recital over the years for our grandchildren and children. According to his cousin Elena, Joe was such a kind and gentle soul, and that he was. Joe always fought hard for the things that he believed in his quiet and persevering way, be it politics or the farm workers or other areas. And our kids probably don't remember, but we walked down Market Street with Cesar Chavez with our little red flags that I made. And one of his many passions was working with others on the Intercambio, an exchange program with UC Berkeley students and the University of Guadalajara. And our family is thrilled that they're using some of the family fellowship fund, Solis Family Fellowship Fund, to get the Intercambio going again in Oaxaca, Mexico next summer. And that's thanks to the Dean Jeff, Tess, Rafael Herrera, Kurt, Peter Manolius, and Luna Calderon and Lupe. Joe's influence has had a ripple effect in so many directions and will continue to do so. Again, this is such an honor, and thank you, everybody.
Dr. Organista has his degrees in clinical psychology, but we love him anyway. I'd now like to ask David Kuroda to come up. David Kuroda, LCSW, he's the former division chief of the Family Court Services and Superior Court in Los Angeles. He's a noted expert in what's called collaborative divorce and mediation. He's been an active member of the California Social Welfare Archive for many, many years and has helped in so many ways to shape the organization over time. Come on up, David.
When I talk to social work students at USC, I commend them on choosing social work as a profession. It's one of the most important, one of the most noble professions. Today, however, we're to commend those who have already contributed to the field and to our society and to our communities. The honorees have made our nation a better nation, more sensitive to those who are most vulnerable, those who are most needy. Of the many ways social workers help families, whether it's abuse, neglect, poverty, one of the areas that has been least recognized is divorce. Judith Wallerstein changed that. More than any person, not only in social work, family law, and education, Judith Wallerstein made us aware that in many ways, divorce is not good for children. When I told my colleagues, including family law attorneys, that I was going to be coming today to talk about Dr. Judith Wallerstein, they all recognized the name. They recognized her important work, surviving the breakup that she wrote with Joan Kelly. And they all knew that of all the people in the divorce literature, when talking about children, nobody has contributed more than Dr. Wallerstein. She has received numerous awards. She's given hundreds of lectures, and I would say she has probably influenced millions of people. And let me tell you how she did that. And in many ways, we can learn from her how we as social workers can have greater impact in our society. First of all, she was an accomplished clinician. She knew how to talk to and understand people, especially children. She was a graduate from the School of Social Work at UC Berkeley. The second is that her vision and her influence enabled her to raise money to do the important work that she wanted to do. She was able to convince the Zellerbach Foundation as well as the Marin Community Foundation to fund her center for over 10 years. She probably had more than $2 million donated to support her work. See, if we have ideas, but we don't have the means to achieve our goals, they just stay as ideas. Judy was different. She was able to convince people that what she wanted to do to help children of divorce was worthy of their money. In fact, right across the bay stands the Judith Wallerstein Center for the Family in Transition. It's only a ferry ride away, but that has become a center of learning and research and influence greater than probably any other center for the study of divorce in this country. She was also an accomplished researcher. We hear today about evidence-based research and treatment. She was a pioneer in that field. It's now a buzzword. Judy worked with those who had influence and who were important in our society. When I joined the courts in 1981, we all learned from Judy Wallerstein. She, along with Justice Don King and Jean Ames, made the very first video presentation informing parents about how their children were being impacted by their divorce. It became a model of similar parent education programs throughout the nation. The fifth thing she did was to use media effectively. She did not publish in obscure but important academic journals. She partnered with Sandy Blakesley, a New York Times science writer, to write several of her books, and because of that, her writing and her research and her influence became very widespread. How many times do we hear of social workers who are on Good Morning America, or the Today Show, or Oprah Winfrey? Judy was. See, so rather than influence a few hundred, a few thousand, her being on the public media influenced millions. Some of my colleagues didn't like hearing what Judy had to say. Sometimes when we would be at court conferences where judges and family court service mediators were in the audience and Judy was introduced, some of my colleagues would say, "Oh, here she goes again." Because you know what? She said things they did not want to hear. But what she said was not only true, it was important. She helped all of us realize that the effects of divorce on children were worthy of our study, and we needed to pay more attention to that. The Hall of Distinction was developed over 10 years ago to honor the most important social workers in our community and our state. I believe no one is more deserving of that honor than Dr. Judy Wallerstein. The last time I was with Judy was on the steps of the Capitol when we were both scheduled to go to a Senate Judiciary Committee meeting. And as we walked up those steps and down the hallway, we talked about a number of things. But you know what? I'm sorry that I never told her what I'm now telling you. Even though I regret not having said that to her then, I feel honored that tonight I can say these things to her husband, Robert, to her children, Nina and Amy, and to her family. And now, to all of you. Please join me in honoring Judy Wallerstein and accepting the honor for Judy as her husband of 65 years, world-renowned psychiatrist, Dr. Robert Wallerstein.
Should begin by thanking CSWA and David for all the things he said on behalf of Judy, who unhappily can't be here to hear it herself. She was a woman of many deeds. You've heard about some of them. Can throw in one more. She was once invited to give a talk about divorce and its impact on children before the 50 judges of the 50 Supreme Courts of the states who have an annual conference where there were 2 speakers. She was given an hour, and Sandra Day O'Connor was the other speaker that day. It may be the only time that the lawyers, judges invited a woman, invited Judy, invited a social worker. So she was a woman of many deeds and many words, and I won't repeat any of them now. I just will say maybe 2 things about her. One has to do with her life and work and love for social work, and the other about her, Judy, and her family. Both her parents were the only members of their family who went to college. And her father was a social worker in the 30s in this country. He was the director of social agencies called settlement houses, which was set up in the large cities to help acculturate the various immigrant groups that came. And he was the director of one or another Jewish community center in various cities in the East in Judy's childhood. He died unhappily, unfortunately, when she was only 8. But she grew up in New York after spending 5 years in Tel Aviv before the State of Israel was established, and went to college in what for those days in the 30s in this country, her mother told her there were 2 reasons to go to college. One, to find a husband, because you were supposed to be married before you got out of college. People got married young then. And the other, in case it didn't work out, to have a career. And she chose social work because she was a kind of a born group worker. She was a head counselor in camps. She worked in playgrounds, and she worked with children, and especially teenagers and teenage girls. She went to a school that was set up by CSS, Community Service Society in New York, which was the largest Protestant social agency in New York, and they had their own school of social work. And then she had one semester in Chicago and came back, and now that same school was part of Columbia University. So she's one of the early graduates of the Columbia University School of Social Work. And she applied for a job, her first job, as a group worker, because she loved just meeting with groups of girls. And CSS, the agency, which was very wealthy, had a donor, a very rich donor, who bought a townhouse in New York and had it renovated to be an inpatient living center, an adolescent treatment center for teenage girls who were in trouble at home, trouble at school, trouble with the law. Some of them were anorexic, some of them were drug addicted. There were all kinds of troubles. And they were all in individual therapy, but they had a group program. And the CSS hired this woman, Eileen Burton, to run the school, and Eileen was looking for a young assistant who would run the group program. And Judy applied for the job. She was in her early 20s and had a lot of ideas about program for these teenage girls. She loved them, they loved her. They were mainly Puerto Rican, some were black, a few were white, and that was her beginning in a field which she went on to do many, many other things you've heard about. That's one part of Judy. The other part was her family. We were married 65 years. It was a wonderful...
Very impressive.
It was a wonderful marriage. What she loved was her family, raising children. When her first child was born, she cut her work down from full-time to half-time. When the third one was born, she quit work altogether and spent 7 years just raising those children. Michael, our son, who unfortunately died in his 50s, important professor someplace, Nina and Amy. And as she said many times to audiences of women mainly, professional women, things they didn't want to hear, when she said the happiest years of her life were the 7 years when she was bringing up our kids. And after that, she had a very, very stellar career. I could talk about her a long time. I want to say one last thing about her. That is my own debt to her. She was a born psychological thinker. She understood people's reasons and motives in a way that few people I've met in my professional lifetime have matched. We've had similar careers in mental health work. I had more training, I had more years of learning, I read more books and maybe knew more theoretical things. She felt she learned a lot from me about the field. I learned an enormous amount from her. She could talk to people and could understand them in ways that I think few others in the world, and I know a lot of people in this world, few others could match. For this, my thanks to her, my thanks to you for making it possible for me to say this in her honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're going to go this way to get a photo.
Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to call Ellen Dunbar up to the podium now. Ellen is Professor Emeritus at California State University, Stanislaus. She has been with the Hall of Distinction Committee since it began, so she's one of the founders, and has also served as chair of the Hall of Distinction Committee and helped to shape the committee as we function today. Ellen.
It's my privilege to be able to talk to you about Mariko Yamada. I first met Mariko when she was a graduate student at the USC School of Social Work, and she was placed at an agency where I was working, and I guess her supervisor was also my supervisor, but I'd forgotten that piece. She was also very involved at that time with the Asian American social workers, and they were organizing, and that was a group that I was very familiar with and had the opportunity to see them develop and do some wonderful things. She was active, involved, spontaneous, assertive, and she still is. In her undergraduate school, she studied psychology, then chose graduate study in social work, and chose to study community organization, social policy, and practice in order to change communities for the benefit of its residents. She demonstrated her independence and determination to learn about social policy, which was not high on the priority for many of the schools at that time. And she asked to do field practicum at Assembly office. That was groundbreaking, and I might say resisted at the time. She came into our profession at a time when the Japanese American community was active in organizing to gain some redress for the imprisonment that they had experienced and to pass legislation that would try to prevent such action in the future. They worked as a community and were ready as a community to fight actions and fight the violations of civil rights that they had experienced. Her parents had been incarcerated by the US government for being Japanese American. She was born soon after their release, and that community was active in advocating for civil rights for all. She got involved and continued in her advocacy for all. Her career, if you see in the program, it's a long career. There are many things she's done. She included working in the office of a county supervisor for Los Angeles County. She got right into politics, right, I think right out of school. She then in Washington, D.C., she worked for the U.S. Census Bureau, and she was an investigator with the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Commerce. Somewhere along the way, she married we claim him, Jan Lee Wong. They have 2 daughters, and they have already gone into their professions. In this process, somehow she got to Yolo County. I think it might have had something to do with Jan Lee coming to NASW. That wasn't in the biographical material I saw, but it kind of worked out. Before too long, she got involved, of course, and then she was elected to the Yolo County Board of Supervisors, where her social work background marked her as a leader on issues related to poor, elderly, and disabled. She was then elected to the California State Assembly in 2008, and I think re-elected in 2010 and 12. She must be getting near the end of the term. There she continues her advocacy for people in need. She's the chair of the Assembly Aging and Long-Term Care Committee. She's a member of committees on agriculture, Veterans Affairs, water, parks, and wildlife, and select committee on homelessness. That's a social worker, isn't it? Mariko is an outspoken advocate for people in need, for the value of social work principles and practices that are applied to providing support, comfort, and care. She takes her work very seriously, but operates with a real sense of humor. We recognize Mariko because she's an advocate that clearly believes in the causes she espouses. She has applied her professional social work knowledge and skills to forming policies that will make a difference for many people. She brings to the policy deliberations a passion for people of all backgrounds, facing many challenges. She models social work practice for current and future social workers. Mariko.
Well, thank you very much, Ellen Dunbar, for that very generous introduction. You know, when you are last in the alphabet almost, with the last name beginning with Yamada, as well as the last to speak, you know, you always run a little risk because, of course, you've heard all sorts of wonderful stories and wonderful memories. So being the last on the program, you know, I want to be very respectful of all of your time and all of the wonderful discussions and conversations that are yet to be. But first of all, hearing Ellen talk about special service for groups, I'm sure that a number of you in this room certainly remember George Nishinaka. George Nishinaka, who is one of the previous inductees, was really my mentor. And you know, just being here with all of you today and seeing all of the wonderful people that were honored today in 2013, but all of those who have gone before us since 2002, you know, it's really a very humbling feeling to be amongst those who have been inducted into this Hall of Distinction. It just gives me a greater sense of responsibility to continue. But you know what I wanted to share with you today, just in my brief remarks, that I didn't really prepare. I started to think about what I was going to say, but social workers always operate in context. We always kind of want to see what the situation is before we determine how we're going to go forward. And so, I just want to say that for me, there has been no other profession that I would have ever picked. I would have never imagined being anyone else but a professional social worker. And in this almost 40-year career of public service that I have been privileged to serve, no matter what job it was that paid my salary, and whenever anyone would say, "Oh, you used to be a social worker, didn't you?" I always would correct that by saying, I am still a social worker. I just happen to be working, in the county for the Board of Supervisors, or I happen to be working as a civil rights investigator in Washington, D.C., or working as an equal employment officer in San Diego, or a county supervisor in Yolo, and even today in the Assembly, in the California State Assembly, that thanks to so many of you, I've been privileged to serve. Whenever someone says, again, whether it's somebody coming into our office to visit about an issue or a lobbyist that we do have to see on occasion, they would always say, well, we know you used to be a social worker. I always correct that by saying, no, I am still a social worker. I will be a social worker, until my last breath, because it is a noble profession, as we have heard. It is the profession that has a stand up for those who do not have a voice, and ever increasing in our society, as we know, in a time when we are at the greatest income inequality in our country in so many decades. It is just incumbent upon us to use the skills, the voice, the ability to negotiate, the ability to adapt, and to seek the kinds of changes that we know our country is capable of. So, I just want to say that it has been a great ride thus far. I could not have done this without the unconditional love and support of my family. And, I actually haven't seen Jan Lee for about 3 or 4 days. So one thing I wanted to check was that since he was a member of the Hall of Distinction Committee, I want to be sure that the ethical conflict that you did recuse yourself from the vote, because if you didn't, I might have to not be able to accept this award. But he didn't tell me anything about this until after the decision had been made. So I want to thank him for, we will have been married in December for 30 years. So for 30, not as great as 65 years, but we have a little ways to go to catch up. But for 30 years, he's been my best friend and my partner. And to my family, the Wong family that is here today, my daughter, our younger daughter Midori, that flew up from San Diego to join us today, and our daughter Mei Lee, who lives in Washington, D.C., sort of back to where I was when I went there as a wide-eyed 26 or 7-year-old, ready to take on the world. But just to close, I just want to say that social workers, we care about people. We have compassion for people and our clients. We also have a commitment to change communities. But there are only 2 social workers in the California State Legislature right now. That's myself and Dr. Susan Eggman. And you did hear, I will be terming out at the end of next year. 6 years goes by pretty quickly. It's only 72 months in a career of 40 years. So, you can't take it too seriously, but then you have to take it very seriously because you only have a 72-month shelf life in my class. Now, thanks to the voters of California, term limits have changed. All of you, I'm sure, are political junkies, and you, social workers do vote, have a very high voter participation rate, and we try to get our clients to match that. But the new class will have up to 12 years to serve in a single house. You know, it matters who is in office. It absolutely matters, as we have, you know, our partner in Congress with Barbara Lee and several others. Fortunately, there's more than 2 social workers in Congress. But, you know, we need more social workers to step up to the plate to run. Because when social workers are at the table, the discussion changes. I could not vote for the TANF reduction to 2 years. I think it's absolutely outrageous that we were asked to go from a 5-year lifetime limit for temporary assistance to needy families to 4 years. I supported that because we were in the toughest 4 budget years that California has seen in a long, long time. That was ugly, you know, to have to reduce from 60 months to 48. But when we were asked to vote to, frankly, because of fiscal realities, to eliminate 2 additional years, to say to a single parent that you only have 24 months in your entire lifetime to get your life together, I just said no. You know, I am not going there. And you know, there are consequences to when you say no as a Democrat to voting against a Democratic budget. But I couldn't do it. I would not do it. I told them I would not do it, and, you know, so be it. That is the state of California today, you know, that we have asked single parents to get their lives together over a lifetime in 24 months. So that's why I think we need more social work voices at all levels, but certainly at the policy level, because who is in office makes a difference. On that note, I will say one last thing. You know, we do have almost 2/3 majority in the legislature now in both houses. You know, we had it and then we lost it because of some special elections and so forth. But just think, we have that 2/3 majority, we have a Democratic governor, and we have been able to pass minimum wage that has been signed, AB 10. We have been able to, after almost a 14-year fight, to permit driver's licenses for those without documents. Those are almost 2 million. Yes, let's give ourselves a hand. The Honorable Gil Cedillo and Luis Alejo brought it home for us, and the governor signed it. That's 2 million people in our state that are already living, working, and driving in California that are going to come into the system of being licensed and insured. I think that's a great achievement. Would not have happened without the 2/3 majorities and a Democratic governor. And Governor Brown today signed AB 1024, which allows Sergio Garcia, after a long fight, to be admitted to the California bar. And he's a dreamer, and that's what we need to continue. So with that, I just want to say thank you to all, and keep calm and campaign on. Thank you very much.
The search for the 2014 inductees is on as of this moment. Maybe 1 or 2 of you out there in the audience will be up here next year, but please do keep in mind to let us know if you know of someone who should be in the California Social Work Hall of Distinction. And now to close the program, I'd like to have Esther Gillies come up. Esther is a professor emeritus. She's the president of the California Social Welfare Archives. She did retire, but then she came back, and now she's retired again. We have no idea where she's going to be tomorrow in that, but I'm sure she's going to be doing something. Esther has provided CSWA with incredible leadership over the last few years, and the type of leadership that has really empowered us to grow and to continue our work into the future. Here's Esther Gillies.
She exaggerates. The Social Work Hall of Distinction, created by social workers to recognize social workers. Social workers who have contributed a significant body of work to the social work profession, who have taken risks, both professional and personal, who have emerged as leaders promoting social programs to address the needs of vulnerable populations, who have advocated and fought for social justice and improved access to education and services for disenfranchised populations. We've seen it all here this afternoon, capturing history, demonstrating the evolution of change resulting from the efforts of social workers, documenting critical issues of our time demanding attention of social workers, achievements of our newest members of the Hall of Distinction, our 6 inductees this afternoon. They leave us in awe. They educate, they inspire, and give us hope for a resolution of the social problems of our time. They bring pride to the social work profession. A remarkable class of inductees. We're deeply grateful to our honorees this afternoon for the leadership and the commitment to social work that continues to inspire across generations, and for making this event come alive. We want to thank you sincerely, and we also want to thank Colleen Friend, the chair of our committee, for her leadership and passion for this work. Monica White. Monica, where did you go? There you are. For her excellent skills at emceeing our program today. To all of our presenters who so skillfully introduced our honorees. To David Kuroda for his generous contributions of time and his skill in providing videotaping of segments of today's events. To Katie Mahalski. Is Katie still around, or is she problem solving? There she is, problem solving all through the day. For her untiring efforts in making everything come together. Cheryl Rainick, for her ongoing support of our work. And for all of the Hall of Distinction committee members for their commitment to the mission of the Hall of Distinction. Ellen Dunbar, Sue Peck, Nancy Lim Yee, Manuel Fimbrace, Jim Kelly, and all of those who continue to come year after year to support this event. And particularly a big thank you to all of the family and friends of the newest members of the Hall of Distinction. We thank you very much for your ongoing support. And we encourage you to stay in touch with us during the year by checking in on, believe it or not, for a 40-year-old, 30-year-old organization, we actually are on Facebook. So check us out. We will be adding our events of the year to Facebook, and this video of today's activity will be posted there shortly. We also have on YouTube, we're really going with technology in the CSWA, the oral histories of many of our inductees in the Hall of Distinction and others who've contributed to social welfare in California. You can find us at the USC School of Social Work YouTube channel, CSWA. Very interesting and fascinating. If you're like me, I tune in for 3 minutes looking for something, and the next thing I know, an hour has gone by because I've been pulled right in with the interesting content. Also, those of you who are affiliated with schools of social work across the state, we ask that you check on our Youth Leadership Project. It's directed towards students in social work programs, in a way coercing our students to use the Hall of Distinction resources and become acquainted with our pioneers and leaders. As has been stated several times today, work on the next class of nominees to the Hall of Distinction begins immediately. The nominations are open, and the process for nominating can be found on the Hall of Distinction website. And our next induction ceremony will be held a year from now in October of 2014 in Southern California. Time and location to be announced, but it will take place. I think we've come to the end of our ceremony today. I thank you so very much. I hope to see most of you next year. Thank you.